Good afternoon. I am Deborah Ashby and I am the President of the Royal Statistical Society, so it's my pleasure to be chairing our AGM today. This is the first AGM we've run online, although by no means the first Royal Statistical Society meeting that we've run online, so we will see how we'll go. We'll follow the same conventions that we do for our face-to-face meetings, but we need to use the technology, which I'll talk you through as we need it. So welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for registering, for dialing in. I can see that we've got a good attendance. I can see that we're quorate, assuming that people are fellows. Can I remind you to keep your cameras muted throughout the meeting? If you want to speak at the appropriate time, use the raise hand button and I'll then call you. So you can unmute the microphone at that point, but please, unless you're one of the sort of people leading, please don't unmute your cameras. And if you need technical assistance, go back to the web browser at the beginning of the portal and click on the chat box at the bottom of the screen, and people behind the scenes can advise you. And I can see some people have already been making good use of that. Our first formal business is to look at the minutes of last year, which I hope if you found the agenda, you should have found the minutes. If not, there's a link to look at. I'm going to take those as read. They are the usual items that we go through. Unless there are any comments or questions, and I can't see any coming through, I'm going to ask you to formally approve these. Now, normally we'd be doing this by proposer, seconder, and vote of thanks, and proposer, seconder, and show of hands. We are going to be, in this case, using the voting system. So this will be our first test of it, but we will be needing it later because we've got some substantive items of business. So the motion I would like to put to you, the vote question, is do you approve the minutes of the 185th Annual General Meeting, which were published at the link that was sent to all people who'd registered? So we've got the results, which are 76% saying yes. Importantly, nobody is voting against, and some are abstaining, which will be most of the members, so that's 57 yeses, 18 abstentions, which will be typically staff and other people on the call who are not fellows and so shouldn't be voting. Right, there was a question about whether this is anonymous. So yes, at the AGM, they're not anonymous. I have to say, as chair, all I'm being given is the numbers. I can't see who's voted. I think those with the technical side will be able to see exactly who's done there, which will help diagnose problems. But it's actually more secret than it normally is, and we can debate whether that's good or bad on another occasion. Okay, so thank you for that. We've approved the minutes, so we've done our first item of business, and rather importantly, shown that the technology is working. Now, most of the items on the agenda are fairly standard ones, but we've got one important, they're important, but this is a substantive item of business, so we will be asked at the end to be voting for a change. The item is that we've done some work that John McInnes in a moment will be telling you more about on categories of membership, and in particular the data analysis category of membership, and that involves a change to the Charter and Bylaws. So rather than me explain it badly, I want to introduce, first of all, we're going to have John McInnes, Ricky McGowan, who is the Vice President for Professional Affairs. Ricky McGowan is a member of the staff who's Head of Professional Standards and Accreditation, and Anna Heath, Membership Manager, is on hand alongside the others to help answer questions. So I think we're going to have Stian Westlake, who is our new Chief Executive, and with Ricky, I'm not quite sure how they're doing, to speak for 2 or 3 minutes, and then I'll turn to John to talk about the data analyst categories, because it's not just the data analyst thing that we need to vote on, there are some other bits and pieces that we're doing at the same time. So over to Stian.
Thanks, Deborah. I will give a little bit of background, then I will hand over to John, and Ricky will be available for questions as well. As long-standing members will know, the charters and bylaws define the governance structure of the Royal Statistical Society. They date back to 1887, when the Statistical Society of London changed the Royal Statistical Society, and specifically the bylaws shape the structure of the society, our disciplinary procedures, and how they can be amended. The purpose of the change that we're asking for approval on now is twofold. First of all, to modernise and clarify some of the governance arrangements without changing their fundamental purpose. In particular, some of the more material changes relate to the changes to the Professional Affairs Committee and specifying its formal delegated authorities from trustees. The second, more substantive change is to create a new category of membership of data analysts, which John is going to speak to. But broadly speaking, these changes have been approved by Council and Executive Committee. I and the rest of the staff strongly commend them to you, but they require approval both by AGM and then finally they will then be passed by the Privy Council to make sure that the changes are formally approved. I'll hand over to John now to speak specifically to the data analyst category.
Okay, thanks, Ian. I think we've seen over the last few years that two of the consequences of the rise of the data economy is, firstly, we're seeing a lot more people moving into work centered on data analysis, often quite advanced work. If you think of various aspects of data science, for example, or the use of data in the health service. And many of these people don't have a first degree in statistics. They're not coming from a pure statistical background. The second consequence we've seen is that managers faced with recruiting people with data skills and statistics skills often have very little idea themselves of the level or the nature of the skills that they need. And that's led us to think that our two existing categories of professional membership, GradStat and Chartered Statistician, are a bit narrow. That there would be some use in extending a range of professional membership to include a new category, which is, if you like, a new entry level of professional membership, which we've decided to call data analyst. We had quite a long discussion about the best title for this category, and I think we agreed that data analyst was the least worst of all the imperfect options that we considered. The criterion for data analyst would be they would need to have a degree. They would need to have done some statistical training. Very often people do a stats unit as part of a degree in biology or computer science or whatever else it might be, or by completing some other RSS approved course. So they need to have some background in statistics, and they need to demonstrate a commitment to the profession by doing continued professional development and keeping a CPD log. If those people are demonstrating a sort of commitment to a future in statistics and data analysis, then they can sign up with us as a data analyst, and then as they take on more training and round out their knowledge, proceed to the GradStat and category of membership, and ultimately, with the right experience and expertise, chartered status. So we're really opening up a new route into the profession for those who demonstrate a commitment to it. At the same time, I should say, we've done this alongside making our accreditation arrangements for existing statistics degrees a bit more flexible to take account of the widening range of degrees with statistics components that we're seeing universities bringing forward. And most importantly of all, we're introduced a new quality mark that people can apply for, which is applicable to any course in statistics at any level. And that gives us the opportunity for the first time to regulate and supervise the vast amount of statistic teaching that goes on, for example, within universities, but not as part of statistics degrees. So the data analyst changes, because they introduce a new category of professional membership, imply a revision to the Charter and Bylaws, but they sit alongside the changes that we've introduced in degree accreditation to, I think, adjust our professional offer to the changing circumstances of the changing data economy.
Right, thank you very much, John, and I know you've done a lot of work leading this through. So we're going to move now to questions. The protocol is that asking people to raise hands, but perhaps I can start, John, by asking you, well, there's two, but I can see them in the chat. So Vijay Kumar Mishra has said, why not data scientists? That could be senior or lower. And Roger Hilton has agreed that data science makes more sense to him, and there's a discussion. But so perhaps I could ask you to address that, and then we'll take further questions.
I think there's, I mean, we did consider the title data scientist, but I think there's a lot of very expert, very highly skilled data scientists who would be very annoyed if we were to grant the title data scientist to somebody who's done 1 or 2 units training in statistics and data analysis and is doing fairly routine work. The idea of the data analyst title is to indicate that this is, if you like, a sort of entry-level grade. And I think that the data scientist title, although it's more generic, would be a little confusing.
Okay, thank you. And then, so there's a comment about whether it could be charter, but then a specific question from Joe Schofield: would this require people to complete a statistics specific first degree, or could people apply on the basis of, for example, stats modules at master's level plus evidence of CPD?
Oh yes, and it's absolutely aimed at people that haven't done a statistics degree. If somebody's done a degree in statistics, they should be going for GradStat. They should be going for graduate statistician status. This is aimed at people who've maybe done a degree with 1 or 2 units of stats and data analysis in it, or they may have done a degree with no stats in it whatsoever, but have since taken some training and some accredited training that would qualify them to start to work within data analysis and statistics.
Okay, thank you. And there's Joe Schofield said, thanks for clarifying, that sounds good. So I can't see any hands raised unless I'm failing the technology. So does anybody have any? Oh, okay, so when Joshi has said, if lots of people want this to avoid misunderstanding of the industry, do you need a syllabus and exams?
I think that, well, my own opinion is the last thing we need is a syllabus and exams. We used to have a syllabus and exams, and one of the things we did about 5 or 6 years ago was get rid of them because they weren't fit for purpose in the new order, as it were. We don't have a fixed syllabus, but we do have some fairly rigorous ideas about the kinds of skills and expertise people need to move in to data analysis and statistics. One of the things we've seen, which is really quite concerning, is you find a lot of people doing very routine work with data, using an Excel spreadsheet package or something. And there's kind of job title inflation, which leads them to be called statisticians. And, by no stretch of the imagination are they a professional statistician. So one of our purposes in introducing the new data analyst category is to try and bring in some regulation to this area so that everybody can be clearer about what different job titles might mean.
Okay, thank you. Now I've managed to sort the technology, and we've got, so I can now see both Trevor Lewis and Rachel Felgate have their hands up. I'm now seeing rather less of the chat, so I'll flip back to that. But so Trevor Lewis, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can now.
Okay, good. Thank you. I have 4 comments to make. I hope that's okay. 1 on the data analyst and 3 on the more general changes to the Charter and Bylaws, if that's okay. So yep. With regard to data analysts, fully support the proposal to introduce this entry-level qualification or award. My only caveat or my only comment is a minor one compared with actually introducing it, and that is I would prefer a postnomial acronym to be specified, because I think if you simply write in full data analyst after your name, it might simply be seen as your job description or your whatever it might be, rather than an award by a professional body. My other preference, as I've mentioned to John in email correspondence, would be to have a descriptor ahead of data analysts, such as registered, because because these people are being put on the register, it might be an appropriate label. And the term registered has been used elsewhere for entry-level professional awards at levels 3 and 5. So I just put that out there as a suggestion. My other 3 comments then are regarding the more general change to the Charter and Bylaws. So the document that was emailed to members explains that the new Bylaw 19 importantly emphasises the independence of the PAC, Professional Affairs Committee, to act as a registration authority. However, the changes we're proposing to the Charter and Bylaws appear to reduce PAC's independence. So let me just mention 3 things. So currently, PAC has assigned responsibilities in the current charter, and it will be moving to have responsibilities delegated from council in the new bylaws. And by having several existing bylaws relating to PAC activities move down into the regulations, then of course council has the ability to change regulations without reference to the Privy Council. So one might argue that reduces independence. And also, I noticed one thing, that in terms of PAC membership being elected, previously it was by the professional qualified membership, and now in Bylaw 19B, it's by council. Now again, that might be thought of as making PAC as a registration authority less independent. So I'm sure there's an underlying discussion, or that in a sense is behind these changes, but all I'm saying is on the face of it, there appears to be a bit of a contradiction in moving from a body that has assigned responsibilities in the Charter to one where these other changes that I've mentioned. My second point on the general change in bylaws and charter is that currently bylaws 59 and 73 indicate that that the bylaws relating to PAC activities, and I think there are about 14 of them, can only be changed or removed with the support of at least 3/4 of the professionally qualified members voting the ballot. So I would have thought, as part of this process we're going through, there needs to be a ballot of professionally qualified members. And my final comment is that the document emailed to us quite rightly emphasises that the wording of the bylaws must be precise, otherwise the meaning may be open to interpretation. And currently, I think there are some apparent inconsistencies and omissions in the proposed bylaws. Now, I could mention 2 or 3 or 4 of those if you would like, but obviously we are tight on time and I need to let other people come in. So if you want me to mention them, I can do.
Thank you, Trevor. And you were heavily involved previously, so that's from a position of a lot of knowledge. Can I ask John to respond, first of all, on the data analyst, and then I'll turn to Stian, particularly on some matters of process, because listening to that, I'm wondering whether there may be aspects that we then need to go to the professional, or check whether we need to go to professional fellows, but the question will be whether we should proceed with the vote today, if there are questions, but I'll ask Stian to address that from a procedural point of view. But John first.
Okay, thanks, Deborah. It's the registered data analyst. It's a persuasive argument. At the end of the day, we came down against doing that. And the main reason that persuaded us there was we thought it would be a bit odd to have the entry-level category being a registered data analyst, and then the next step up simply being a graduate statistician. So you'd to an outside observer, you'd go from being registered to a apparently not registered. So we thought it was less confusing to just go for the straight data analyst title. If I could just quickly comment on the revision to the bylaws and the powers of PAC and so on. I mean, I would not be happy if I thought that any change to the Charter and Bylaws was reducing the independence and power of PAC, and I don't think they do that. What they do, I think, is clarify a situation which we had at the moment, where the relationship between council and PAC wasn't spelled out, and we had a kind of, it was a bit like sort of dual power, and it was rather unclear what's within the remit of council, what's within the remit of PAC, and I think that the changes to the Charter and Bylaws clear that up without actually reducing the power of PAC, and the provision about the PAC's membership, I think in practice what's happened in the past is that it's been a question of soliciting people, trying to get people to come on to PAC. It's not as if we're inundated with candidates, and council's always played a prominent role in that. So I think this is really a sort of procedural tidying up rather than any substantive change in the power or independence that PAC has.
Thank you, John. Can I ask Steve for his views, and I'll just see if Trevor wants to come back on that.
Thank you, Deborah. And yes, I've been very much guided by John and other PAC members' views on this question. Certainly, our intention is not to in any way compromise the independence of PAC. On the broader question you mentioned of the professional members' vote on this issue, Trevor, I think we've certainly been discussing this with you recently, and I think we're happy to conduct that vote. I think it makes sense to, if we can take the vote at the moment from an AGM point of view, to make sure that we have the required support from an AGM, but then before anything is formalised, that we make sure that we assiduously follow procedure and take the vote of professional members as well.
Okay, so when I put that to the meeting, it'll be on that understanding. Okay, that's very helpful. Trevor, did you want to come back on anything? And then Rachel Felgate, I'm going to go to next.
Okay. Well, I think that and I think it's right that we do, because it's so in the bylaws, that we should go to the vote by the professionally qualified members. I think it's important that is an informed vote. So I'd like us to set up some way whereby ahead of the vote, the professionally qualified members can have a discussion and get clarification and understanding. And so things like the rationale, which has been mentioned for why we might change the current structure relating to PAC and council, is useful. And you see, I think one of the difficulties currently is that these changes were not considered substantive, and I think they are substantive. If you make a significant change to the charter and the relationship between PAC and council, I think that is substantive. Now, I'm not saying I would be against it. I'm just saying it needs an awareness to be raised among the professional membership to understand the rationale for the change, and for them to have some opportunity to either challenge it or support it or comment on it or get clarification. So I think that's all I would say about that. The other point, which I don't want us to gloss over, is that I think in its current standing, there are some inconsistencies and clarifications. They don't change the meaning of the current bylaw, the bylaws being proposed, but I think they're important changes to be made. And I could mention a couple of them if you want, but I am aware that other people need to be able to come in. So that's, if you want, my initial response.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. I think probably we'll take other questions, and then we'll before the vote come back to think how we handle that. Rachel.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me okay. Just first of all, I want to say thank you for the opportunity to take part in this today. As I now live in Australia, it's particularly difficult to get to AGMs currently. I wanted to raise a couple of things, most of which Trevor has actually very eloquently already covered. So thank you, Trevor. So I'll just start with my very mundane comment, which is around just a question about whether the new category of professional membership will be a paid category, an extra charge on top of the fellows membership fee. I'm hoping it isn't, as I would love to, as a former member of the PAC, I would really love to see the professional membership grow, and I believe that this is a good addition. However, if it was an added membership fee on top, because GradStat I think isn't much, and I don't see how you would justify that. So I hope the answer is no, it's not. I totally agree with Trevor's comment about a post-nominal allocation or assertion. I think that's incredibly important. My other 2 points were mainly around the fact that, yes, absolutely, a ballot is needed according to the bylaws. I have recently been through an update of a set of professional bylaws and charters in another country, and getting some of those things right is obviously very important. My final comment or question really was around the changes to accreditation or the qual mark idea, and I was just, again, it's a question because I haven't fully understood those changes as to whether they apply to overseas as well as British universities and courses. If that could be answered, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, John, would you like to respond to?
Yeah, certainly. The new quality mark applies to accreditation of degrees wherever they are, whether it's in the UK or elsewhere. What we've done is, if you like, change the orientation of accreditation from the degree towards the individual components of a degree, and said, if you have sufficient quality mark components, and you can convince us that your degree gives students the graduate skills that we are looking for, then we'll accredit your degree. So we're taking a rather different approach to the one that we've done in the past, which was modelled more on the old RSS exams. On the post-nominal, I mean, I'm sure we can probably look at this again, but at the certainly I think it would be anomalous to have registered data analyst and then graduate statistician. If we could come up with a coherent post-nominal for graduate statistician, then that's something that we could certainly look at if people feel that that would be a better way to go.
Okay. Did you want to question on the fees as well? And there's 1 or 2 questions in the chat picking up on.
Ricky will keep me right on this, but as far as I'm aware, we're not intending to sort of charge people to become a data analyst.
Yeah, the fees, the yearly membership fee does not increase, so that stays the same as fellow, but there is a one-off application fee at the time of applying for data analysts, which is currently set at £50. But yet, once you have that title, the yearly membership fee will be the same as the fellow fee at I think £35 or £140 as it is currently.
Thank you very much, Ricky, for clarifying that. So if anyone's got any other questions, could you raise your hand or ask it as a rather specific question in the chat? No, perhaps I can just... yeah, so Anna Heath said, so the question is, we need to be clear what level of CPD stats courses are needed. Will there be a committee who gives guidance as to what's sufficient and what's not? And that, I think she's copied down the one I was trying to find. So, John or...
Absolutely. Well, alongside the introduction of data analyst, we've also introduced a competency route to GradStat. We were in the anomalous position before of there was a competency route to chartered status, but there wasn't a competency route to the level below that. And in effect, to move from data analyst to GradStat, you need to show via CPD, professional experience and further training that you brought yourself up to the level of skills and knowledge that we'd expect of a graduate statistician who'd qualify for GradStat by completing a relevant degree.
Okay, thank you. So I'd just like to come back to Trevor's questions on, I know that you've got wording things, and I'd rather not go through them in detail, but the question to Trevor is how we handle them, whether they are anything that's very substantive, or whether there are things that perhaps, especially if we're going to be going to the professionally qualified fellows for a vote, could be tidied up prior to that. Trevor, can you unmute and possibly give us just...
Hi, Deborah. I'd be happy to submit them as possible changes, and happy to discuss them with whoever's moving from the current proposal maybe to a slightly updated one in the light of these comments or any other comments. So happy to do that, and do that before the version or the discussion that goes on with the professionally qualified fellows.
Okay, and are they largely matters of consistency, or is there anything of any substance that we ought to be aware of, of any genuine that might change the meaning?
Well, I think they don't change the meaning, but they do give clarification, and I think it's in line with the message that was sent to us about bylaws, that they need to be precise, and I think it's just giving them precision rather than substantive change.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Now, there's a question from Milan Joshi about whether we'll look at the chat afterwards at leisure to pick at anything that might be useful. Yes, we will, and certainly some of the chat is going off on things which are not mission critical to today's business, but are more generally relevant. We'll be looking at that. I'm just trying to make sure that we've got everything on the table that we need, because unless there are any further questions, my next task as chair is to proceed to a vote. So bearing in mind that we've now agreed that on the things that affect the professionally qualified fellows, we're going to have a separate process to make sure that we're meeting our obligations on that. What I want to put to the meeting is the question of, do you agree to the changes set out in the proposed new charter and bylaws? And again, it's yes, no, and abstaining. And so the key one we have a discussion on is the data analyst, but there are other things that Stian has also put to you. So if you could vote now, the vote is showing. Okay, so the votes are now up. You can see that it's a majority. So we've got 14% abstentions. We can put those on one side, but we've got 80% of those present voted yes, 6% no, and in numbers, that's 64 voted yes and 5 voted no. So I think by the rules, I'm just looking for a steer that carries it, but we've heard the things that need sort of finalising. So thank you very much for that, and thank you to John in particular and to Ricky for all of your work on this, and to Stian for sort of taking us through some of the other changes. Thank you for your work, but these two have been at it for a very long time. Right, so the next item on the agenda does not result in a vote. There are some things later that do result in a vote, but this is the presentation of the Society's work, which went down well in previous years, and so there was a request that we had it as a standing item, and so we're going to have Stian, who you've already met, Jen Rogers, who's our Vice President for External Affairs, John Forster, who's Vice President for Academic Affairs, Sharon Witherspoon, Vice President for Education and Statistical Literacy, and John McInnes, who you've already met because of his professional affairs, and they're going to make a presentation. Now, Jen may have had to leave, but if I can hand over to you, and I think we're starting, if she is there, we're starting with, no, I can't see Jen. So if we could go to John Forster next.
I think we're going to start with Stian, aren't we?
Well, I'll give an overview and then we'll proceed on to, if that's okay.
We are starting with Stian, absolutely.
So thank you everyone. I should give the caveat at the outset that I've been chief executive for a grand total of 9 weeks. So most of what I'm speaking at is the achievements and the work of others. But it will come as no surprise to anyone to hear that, like, as for everyone, it's been an unusual 12 months for the Royal Statistical Society, not just because of COVID, but significantly because of COVID. In January, my predecessor, our excellent executive director, Hitan Shah, moved on to take up the helm at the British Academy. Then in March, obviously, the COVID lockdown happened, which, as well as changing many things for everyone in the world, very specifically for us, meant no more in-person meetings, trainings, or room hire, which was a source of revenue for us. Staff had to rapidly shift to working from home. It led to a change of workload and the kind of policy that we focused on, and also led to significant changes like moving the conference online. That wasn't the only big change. Obviously, another significant event that happened earlier this year was the whole Black Lives Matter movement, in which many organizations, the RSS included, have rightly been encouraged to think more about the status of diversity and inclusion in their work, in the history of their disciplines. So I think it reflects incredibly well on the volunteers, the members of the RSS, and also on the staff, that they've responded very well to these challenges. Nicola Emerson, who was acting chief exec, has managed many of these challenges very, very ably. I'm very grateful to have been taking over from her. But the energy and goodwill that members have shown in adapting to different ways of work has been really welcome too. I'll just quickly go through some of the specific areas. Our membership rates and joining rates, I'm glad to say, remain strong. And part of the previous discussion about introducing the data analyst qualification, I think will help that in the future. It will help us reach out to new groups of people who are important to our mission. We have also put in place, with great effort, a new CRM system to help us manage and keep in touch with our members. And I'm glad to say that project is now coming to completion. Similarly, despite lockdown, submissions to our journals remain strong, and we have shifted to, we had our first virtual discussion meeting, which was extremely well attended. So some benefits of remote working there. Similarly, our training offering has been rapidly shifted over to a virtual offering. And although we've had a brief downturn, seems now to be thriving well. Our policy work, which, as you know, is an important part of what we do, has had to pivot very rapidly because COVID has thrown up a whole range of new statistical challenges and issues that we need to take forward. I'm particularly grateful to our COVID-19 task force of senior members that has worked tirelessly to put together explainers, to deal with media, and to work with politicians to try and improve the statistical understanding of the response to COVID. Sylvia Richardson, our president-elect and co-chair of that task force, is testifying to a select committee on this today. She and John Deeks were on the front page of the Times talking about the government's moonshot plans recently. And as Sharon will say in a second, we've been deeply involved in what seems to become known as the exam adjustment fiasco, making sure that we have been keeping government and others honest on that point. Our other work has not been dropped. We've continued to be involved in important issues to us. For example, the issue of pre-release statistics, where we've made some real progress with the Scottish government in the last few days. Similarly, on the question of inflation measurement, we put in a big submission to the ONS on their, we think, mistaken plans to change the way inflation is measured, and that resulted in a well-attended meeting, and kudos from them. I should also just talk about some of our significant events. Conference, we took the decision to shift to an online event. And I'm thrilled to say that went really well. The conference committee and the organisers really pulled out all the stops to make sure everything ran smoothly. And although costs were increased because we had to pay for an additional IT suite while still paying for venue hire, unfortunately, we did manage to break even from that, which is good from a financial point of view. One of the things that I think is worth mentioning that happened at the conference was Deborah, our president, gave an update on our commitment to diversity and inclusion, and we will be pushing that forward over the coming months and year, so working on not just how statistics can make a contribution to greater diversity and inclusion and fighting racism in society, but how we can make sure that we are adequately promoting diversity among the society itself, both among our members and our staff. Our finances, despite a tough time, remain resilient, although costs have increased in some areas, they've decreased in other areas. And I think it leaves us well positioned to take on the challenges of the coming year. I'll hand over to the Vice President to give very brief updates
now. Thank you very much, Stian. So if I can hand over now to John Foster.
Yes, so very briefly, the Society continues to act in support of statistics as an academic discipline through its Academic Affairs Advisory Group and its Vice President Academic Affairs, who's myself. But I want to give particular thanks and credit to Guy Nason, my predecessor, whose term of office finished in December and who did so much to increase the Society's activities in this area. Very, very briefly, we continue to liaise on the Society's behalf in exercises such as the Teaching Excellence Framework, where we still await the publication of the Pearce Review, now supposed to be this autumn, on the Research Excellence Framework, in the liaison with research councils, particularly EPSRC, but actually we are having a much more close consultation now with ESRC. We look to try and expand that. With acting with our fellow learning societies in the mathematical sciences through the Council for Mathematical Sciences. And one thing that we are looking to do is to take on some of the support and liaison activities of the now dissolved Committee of Professors of Statistics, which hopefully should give AAAG and the Society a better two-way communication channel with representatives of academic statistics departments. So that's something to look out for going forwards.
Thank you very much, John. Now, we're running quite tight for time, so I'm going to go to Sharon, but I think John's already said quite a lot, so if he doesn't mind, I won't go to him, but I'll go to Sharon, and then we'll move on to the other items on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Deborah. You will have read, I hope, the draft annual report, which reports on last year's activities, and many of those are core activities that we're continuing this year. So a view to taking a more strategic focus, to considering at secondary school level how we engage more broadly than just A-level statistics or A-level maths, but also open the debate about deepening and widening statistical skills and knowledge at secondary level. And there is also a read across with some of the issues John McInnes has raised, with the fact that we supported the work of the International Data Science in Schools project and what that might mean. I want to stress that a lot of that work means acting in partnership and hopefully in a formative way with partners such as the Royal Society, learned societies in both the sciences and the social sciences in increasing their engagement with statistical skills. But as many of you will know, since March, our work has been dominated by the exams adjustment or the grading adjustment, quote, fiasco, unquote, where we tried to play a role, and again, helpfully involving both Guy Nason and Paula Williamson, but also the Educational Policy Advisory Group in some of the technical aspects, but also standing back and pointing out this raises really big questions for the use of statistical adjustments, which we've not called moderation, but statistical decision-making for individuals, and how that is different from a concentration on aggregate level statistics. And we were delighted that the Office for Statistics Regulation agreed, after some initial reluctance, to take up this issue. I want to stress it's not just a post-mortem on what went wrong with the grades for this year's school students. It does raise bigger questions about the levels of accuracy and so on that are needed, about the importance of transparency in engagement with a statistical audience, which aren't met by tick box consultation exercises, and also about the professional obligations of statisticians in public bodies and what protections exist for them. So I'm sure that work will continue over the next few months. We're concerned to build lessons for the future, not just carry out a post-mortem on what went wrong, which I think is actually rather clearer.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I know how much work you put into that, especially over the summer, but also before. So in many ways, it'd been good to have a discussion on this, but I think in the interest of time, we won't. I can see the discussion in the chat. So if there is anything you'd like to raise, could you put it in the chat and we will look at that afterwards. But what I'd like to do now is to move, we have 3 formal items for which we will need votes. So we've had the informal, if you like, report on society's presentation of society's business. We now move to the formal annual report. And so I'd like to introduce Kevin Barnes, who you haven't met yet, and Charlotte Stivell, who's our head of finance, who've played a blinder, as Stian's indicated. So I'd like to ask Kevin to speak to the annual report, then we'll take any questions, and there'll be a vote about, because we need to formally decide whether we accept the annual report and the auditor's accounts. So over to you, Kevin. And Kevin is our new treasurer who's joined council quite recently, so welcome, first AGM.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and it's a real privilege to be here and to be able to present the annual report and accounts to you. These cover the 2019 financial year, and as Deborah has said, that's the period before I've been appointed, so I'm entirely dependent on my predecessors for the content of the accounts that I'm presenting, but also the credit for the strong financial performance during that time. I do want to draw your attention to a few key points. The financial performance last year included a turnover of £2.9 million, and after expenditure that left a net income of £383,000. That was sufficient to be able to cover the actuarial loss on the pension scheme that was incurred last financial year. And the vast majority of that net income surplus that was generated related to restricted activities, and therefore it's money that we received during 2019 and will get spent in future financial years. The largest of those being a big lottery fund Statisticians for Society grant, and that will enable the provision of pro bono statisticians to small charities. At the end of the year, reserves are healthy, and they include £3.1 million of unrestricted funds, and of that 3.1 million, 1.9 million of it is relatively liquid. It's in cash and money that we're owed or owe to other people netted off. And having that sum of money is particularly valuable for when we do face uncertainties and bumps in the road, as Stian and others have referred to earlier, we are experiencing at this time. So let me give you a quick update as well, not just on the last 2019, but to try and bring that up to date. The pandemic is having an impact on our finances. Income is down around about 20% this financial year, but pleasingly, due to the careful management and identifying expenditure savings and incurring some additional expenditure in some areas, but net, we've been able to make some savings due to operating less activities or doing some activities in a cheaper way. We do remain on course this year to achieve a break-even position despite that lower turnover. When you come to the vote and considering the approval of the accounts, I'd like to give you some reassurance as well. The external audit has been a very thorough process. Despite it being done remotely, it has been as thorough as previous years, and the auditors in particular have taken an extra look at our going concern status. There's an audit committee who've worked diligently and ensured good financial processes and controls. And my predecessor as honorary treasurer during this period, Trevor Lewan, has done a fantastic job and very ably supported by Charlotte Stivell, our head of finance. So there's a number of different layers of controls that should give you the assurance to when considering whether to approve the accounts or not.
Thank you very much, Kevin. So I'd like to throw it open for questions. So I will be asking for a formal vote on whether we accept the accounts. So are there any questions that people would like answering before we move to that vote? I can't see any hands up, and nothing come in the chat yet. Okay, I will take that there aren't any questions because it was so clear. So the vote question is, do you approve the annual report and audited accounts for 2019 as a true and fair report on the normal financial activity of the society in the year ending 31st of December 2019? Okay, so we had 10% abstaining on this, but we've had everyone who voted yes or no has voted yes. So that is very straightforward. So thank you very much for that, Kevin. And that was 74 voting yes and 8 abstaining. So we now move on to another regular item on the AGM. We have to set the subscriptions for the year, and so this is an absolutely annual item. So I'm going to ask Stian to speak for just 1 or 2 minutes, and then we'll open the floor for if anyone has got any brief questions, and then we'll again voting on the proposals that Stian will tell you about.
I will be very brief here. Normally, we increase our fees slightly every year to reflect inflation. This year, we're proposing something rather different. We're aware that for many of our members, many of our members' employers, the coming year will be a difficult one economically, and we're conscious that we've had to make adjustments in terms of moving events online. So we're proposing that this year, exceptionally, we will freeze membership fees in nominal terms and effectively waive the increase. Our budgetary planning for the next year is currently based on this, and this is certainly doable. It's affordable. We think this is a worthwhile both as a gesture of recognition to the difficult times that we're likely to face economically, but also sort of thanks to our existing members for bearing with us.
Thank you very much, Stian. So does anybody have any questions on that? I can see a comment from Joe Schofield about appreciating the decision to freeze fees. Grateful to the RSS. So well, we haven't made that decision yet, but that's indicative. Anybody wanting? Yes, Jonathan Gowden.
Hello. So I teach quite a number of undergraduates who we'd like to convert some of those when they finish to members, perhaps. And I note that we do levy this £10 fee for their GradStat each year. I do wonder if that's appropriate for people just finishing their degrees. I wonder if we could waive that in a sense and enable them to get the GradStat, because we're not going to be charging these new data analysts. We'll be charging them a small entry fee and then that's it. I'm aware that as GradStats, they can get sort of discounts on the training, et cetera, et cetera. I wonder if we can sort of hook them in by saying, well, actually, you're a member. Now you can apply to be a GradStat, and we'll give you then access to the mentoring scheme to become a CStat in future years. We'll give you these reductions on any training you might want to undertake, because sort of money is tight at the moment, and it's tighter for people at the GradStat level than it is for the CStat level people. And I wonder if I'm aware that I saw the numbers that we've got several hundred GradStats. Well, I wonder if a small increase in the CStat fee of £3 or £4 could then, not this year perhaps, but a slightly larger than inflation increase next year, could allow us to make the GradStat to be a free status and then perhaps convert more people to being CStats by having free access to the membership, to the mentoring scheme and such things.
Okay, so that sounds like a suggestion for next year you put in there. And Andrew Garrett has asked a very similar question in the chat. Is there any fee the society seeks to recover the increase in future years with overinflation increases? Stian, could I ask you to respond to?
I'll respond very briefly to say that this is very, very timely for us to hear this, because one of the things that we're beginning at the moment is a review, as it were, of overall our membership offering, to think about how we position ourselves for the next quarter of the 21st century, if you like. What should a membership organisation look like? And a big part of that is thinking, how do we structure our membership fees? And exactly that kind of question about should we be discounting at earlier levels is really relevant. So we will take those things on board and think about those in the coming months. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We've also got a question from Olusola Ajinka. So could you unmute yourself and?
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shola Adenka from Nigeria. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, I can see you. Okay. First and foremost, what I want to say about is how we are fellow of the body in Nigeria. How can we increase our database? How can we increase the number of people that become a member of the Royal Statistical Society? Because I observe, even on this AGM, I myself and one other person is the only member from possibly Nigeria. So I'm looking at how we're going to do it so that we have more people that will be aware of the body and we have more RSS activity at the societal level in Nigeria. Then to include people from the academic in Nigeria, Nigerian universities and polytechnics. Virtually all polytechnics in Nigeria offer statistics to HND level, and we have it in universities. A large number of them have it to PhD level. Yet, members of Royal Statistical Society in Nigeria are very few. It's difficult to get a member in those days to sign a membership for you. So what can we do about that?
Also, could I suggest that we take this one afterwards, because it's not directly relevant to the vote we've got to be about. It's really important, but I think it goes beyond the question that we need to vote on. But thank you very much for raising that.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've got questions I think can feed into the review, but nothing that changes this proposal. So could I put this proposal to the vote that the basic member subscription is held at £142, CStat £46, GradStat £10, and the journal subscription £42 per journal. So could we do the first vote? This is that it should be held at £142 per annum. Okay, so the first one has been carried almost unanimously, with 86%, just one or two people voting. I think that's one person voting no. Could we have the second part of that? Yeah, that was 70 voting yes and one person voting no. If we have the second bit about the CStat, which is £46, everyone who voted yes. The third one is the GradStat subscription at £10. So that was 71 yeses and no no's on the previous one. So this is the GradStat, should be held at £10. So that is carried, not unanimously, but it's certainly carried. And so that was 66 yeses and 3 no's. And then the final one is the additional journal subscription of £42 per journal. Okay, and again, that is carried, again, not quite unanimously, but so all four of the, so that was 68 yeses, 2 no's. So all of those are carried by the meeting. The final item on the agenda is the election of the auditors, who, have you heard from Kevin, do a very important job to assure us that the accounts are what we think they are. So, Kevin, could I just briefly ask you to introduce this item?
Thanks, I will do. St Vincent are the Society's auditors. They have been for many years now. However, in 2019, there was a tendering process to invite tenders from other firms. And following that competitive process, St Vincent were reappointed as auditors. However, to ensure independence, a new audit partner was appointed. That's Joanna Pittman, one of the partners within St Vincent. And therefore we get the benefit of familiarity, but also freshness in their review. And the proposal this year is to reappoint St Vincent as the auditor for another year, subject to the approval of the members.
Thank you very much. So are there any questions on that? I can't see any hands. I can't see anything in the chat. So I will put that to the meeting. Do you agree to appoint St Vincent of Invicta House in London as the Society's auditors to hold office until the conclusion of the next AGM is their term? And in the vote you can see their full address, which is quite near the Society. Okay, that has come in unanimous. So thank you very much for that. So the very final item on the agenda is that on behalf of Stian, I would like to thank everyone for attending, for doing things in a very different format to usual. I'd certainly like to thank the staff and those behind the scenes for making this possible. So that's all I want to say. Stian, do you want to say anything?
No, just to add my thanks to everyone for your patience and for making it work. Thank you.
Thank you. And I can assure you that the comments in the chat and others that went beyond the business, we will be looking at very clearly and taking forward in appropriate ways. So thank you very much for that. Right, have a good afternoon.